Welcome to TFD. Please join our society. You get tons of free goodies and exclusive videos every single month, and so many other awesome things, including office hours with me. Just a few of our amazing members-only bonus video are things like exposés on everyone from Dave Ramsey to Gwyneth Paltrow, and deep dives into my own best ever personal money decisions. Join. Hit the join button.
Hey guys, it's Chelsea from The Financial Diet, and this week's video is brought to you by our own because we have some exciting news around here. Our most popular class, Building Wealth by Doing Nothing, Investing 101, and her shiny new sister, Investing 201, both taught by friend of TFD and investing expert Amanda Holden, are now available for purchase. These classes have been taken by almost 10,000 of you. And many of you enjoy learning in a live virtual classroom setting, but a lot of you have also let us know that you prefer to do things on your own schedule. So ask and ye shall receive. These classes are the recorded versions of Amanda's live investing course. Each course is available for $125 and includes access to the full course designed to be taken over 4 weeks or at whatever pace feels best for you, the course syllabus, corresponding homework to go with each lesson, presentation slides that go along with each class, access to pre-recorded office hours where Amanda answers students' investing questions, and additional resources from Amanda to help you along your wealth building journey. If you've been wanting to learn how to invest and build wealth, these are the classes you need in your life. Amanda's an incredible teacher and a personal friend of mine, and she makes learning this hard stuff actually fun and entertaining. We definitely recommend taking the 101 level class first, but both are available for purchase at the links in our description. So you guys may not know it, but we are almost exactly 1 year from when we closed on the apartment, the home that I live in, love, and am reporting to you live here from. I did a whole video on this channel back when I bought it, or a little bit after because I needed to settle in and everything, all about the realities of buying my home in New York City, what it cost, how long it took me to actually get the place, how many places I looked at. The secret is this one. And basically all of my reasoning and rationale for buying that home. It's only a year into the process, which is pretty small in the time scale of most homeownerships, but I've only increased in my gratitude and joy and fulfillment with having this home, and increasingly felt it was a great financial decision with every subsequent month. And as I addressed in that video, what may be a lot of money to some may be a little amount of money to others. When I did that video and I disclosed that I spent $752,000 on that apartment, I was kind of like nervous going in being like, oh my God, everyone's gonna get mad at me that I'm like spending all of this money. And actually a lot of the comments were like, girl, that isn't even that much. So it goes to show you really never can tell what people are going to say and how they're gonna respond to the sharing of numbers. But you know, those are mine. So if you want the context in terms of numbers for the apartment, you can go check out that video and I go through the whole thing. I also, it's worth saying, did buy my home in Manhattan, which is even within New York City, a pretty unusual real estate market. And usually that means on the much more expensive side, which it still was per square foot when we bought. But we really locked in our home's price at a time when homes in New York City were still very, very negatively affected by the COVID pandemic, which had people fleeing from major cities and especially New York City in a way that was pretty unprecedented. Estimates suggest that sale prices fell by roughly $60,000 or around 8% in response to both of the following: 1,000 additional infections per 100,000 residents, and a 10 percentage point increase in unemployment in a given period. These price effects were more pronounced during the second wave of infections, and based on cumulative infection rates through 2020, the estimated COVID-19 price discount ranged from approximately 1% to 50% in the most affected neighborhoods and averaged 14%. We purchased our apartment for substantially less than the previous owners had purchased it for in 2016, so we were definitely benefiting from that substantial COVID discount. Which does mean the value of our home relative to what we paid for it did rebound and increase a lot more quickly than the national average. Whereas a lot of the areas immediately surrounding New York saw kind of the opposite effect, where people were scrambling to buy homes because they wanted space, they wanted to not be on public transportation, they wanted all of the things that you basically can't get in a super dense city, which became all the more desirable during a pandemic where you can't go to places like bars and restaurants and museums, and you definitely don't want to be around a bunch of other coughing people. So markets around New York increased sharply in value for the real estate market as New York fell. People were paying outrageous sums of money for suburban homes, and many people were even way outbidding the actual asking price of the home in order to secure a contract. There are a lot of reasons why those kinds of decisions are not great financially, which I do talk about some in my home buying video. But suffice to say, if you're someone who purchased a home at the top of a market, your mileage is likely to vary somewhat from what ours was buying at the bottom of it. But regardless of where you're buying, when it comes to thinking about decisions like homeownership and how it affects your finances, it's helpful to think in averages. National appreciation values average around 3.5 to 3.8% per year. Ownerly explains that the average home appreciation per year is based on local housing market trends as well as the economy, and this makes for a great deal of fluctuation. When the supply of available homes for sale exceeds the number of buyers, prices will drop and vice versa. This is the basic economics of supply versus demand, and supply can exceed demand if there is significant unemployment and people just can't afford to buy homes, causing prices to drop. We've talked before on the channel about the misconception that buying a home is universally a good financial decision, let alone the only major financial decision that everyone is supposed to make in order to become an adult financially. There's a lot of data out there we'll link you to that shows that in many cases, buying a home can actually be a bad financial decision. And there are experts who will advise against it in a majority of cases. Being locked into a mortgage that you may need to move from if your circumstances change, or can't afford if you suddenly lose a source of income, or in a market where you paid a very high price compared to how that home is appreciating, or even in some cases depreciating, can put you in a very precarious financial position because unlike with a rented space, you can't just up and move if things change without, in many cases, taking massive losses. That being said, unlike most investments, primary homeownership actually fills a non-financial need for most people because you can't live inside an ETF, but you can live inside a home and you do need to live somewhere. And in some cases, like we experienced, locking ourselves into a mortgage we can more than afford allowed us to escape, for example, the insane rent increases that have been plaguing NYC post-pandemic, which many of my friends have fallen victim to. But the flip of that often exists in markets where people find themselves upside down on their mortgage during an economic downturn. An underwater mortgage, sometimes called an upside-down mortgage, is a home loan with a higher principal than the home is worth. This happens when property values fall, but you still need to repay the original balance of your loan. And mortgages actually aren't the only loans that can end up underwater. Auto loans, motorcycle loans, and houseboat loans can also go underwater. And houseboats can also go literally underwater. So long story short, homeownership in and of itself is going to be different for everyone, and whether or not it's a good financial decision, quote unquote, is usually something that has to be determined on a much longer time scale than just a year. In general, it's recommended when buying a primary residence that you should be prepared to live in that residence somewhere between 5 and 10 years at minimum before you sell it in order to ensure that you're not going to be taking any kind of a loss. But homeownership does affect a lot of other day-to-day finances. So I wanted to just take a quick moment to go down the things I spend more and less on since becoming a homeowner. I spend more money on mother effing repairs. According to one article, as a general rule, you should expect your annual home's maintenance cost to amount to about 1 to 4% of your home's value. This means if your home is worth $300,000, you may spend anywhere from $3,000 a year to $12,000 a year on upkeep. And I can personally say as a homeowner that the first time something goes wrong unexpectedly in your home and you realize like, oh, there's no landlord to call. There's no management company that's going to come in and fix this for me. There's no one who's going to pay for this for me. Not only do I have to pay for the whole thing myself, but I have to coordinate the whole thing myself. I have to find the right contractors. I have to get the certificate of insurance. I have to schedule. I have to take time out of when you suddenly have to do all of it yourself, it is a real wake-up call. And as I talked about in my video, which I did a whole video breaking down my kitchen renovation with numbers and products and all of that stuff. And if you want to watch that video and all of our other bonus videos, just click that join button and join the society at the $4.99 or up tier, and you will get all of that. But one of the things that I addressed in that video was we had a lot of unexpected electrical and plumbing issues during our renovation, which is pretty common because you're in there fiddling around with stuff. And that was something we had to handle entirely by ourselves and pay for entirely by ourselves. And just the refrigerator, for example, which a part on it basically broke when there was a power surge essentially during us playing around with the electricity. Just getting that part fixed was $1,000, including the part and labor. And that was totally on us. So these are not expenses that are coming up every day, but going from having the repairs on things like that being covered by your landlord essentially / management company to having to do all of them yourself, not just financially, but logistically, was a big wake-up call. That is a lot more money we're spending. Now, less money is rent. So I pay the mortgage every month and I pay $2,365 a month in mortgage, and my previous rent was $3,250 a month. So already that's like $1,000 less than I was paying previously on rent. Now I do pay co-op fees, and obviously there are things like homeowners insurance, which we'll talk about, but As I mentioned, rents have been increasing radically in New York City. And given the market increases in rent that we've seen in our area, it is very likely that the total amount we would be paying in rent every month would exceed what we're paying all together every month for our home that we own, in which obviously we're building equity. So just having that locked in mortgage, which is so much lower than what we were paying in rent, and which I know is, solidly below what we can afford. It's just a huge relief, honestly, because a lot of things fluctuate, especially in a big city, and having that rent be less is awesome. So less on rent, but I'm spending more on upfront furniture purchases. So basically, long story short, is we don't buy crap anymore. So when you're moving around a fair amount, and we lived in 4 New York City apartments before we got the one that we own, you have to move furniture around a lot, which you have to often break down and put back together. You often are moving into different spaces where you don't need the same kinds of pieces that you have in one place to bring to the other. You're constantly in a state of flux where in many cases, besides the upfront cash, maybe you don't have it in your 20s when you're just kind of figuring it all out, but you're also sort of inclined to buy stuff that's not meant to last forever, or stuff called like knockdown furniture, where you're not really meant to take it apart and put it back together. You're just meant to knock it down. Stuff being made with like MDF and particle board and products like that. A lot of IKEA, a lot of just crap, basically. But now that we're living in a home where we know we're going to be here for a very, very long time, it only makes sense to invest in pieces that are of a higher quality. We also have a little storage unit, which is life-changing for me. I've never experienced such luxury, but that does mean also like we have certain pieces that we can't currently fit into our configuration, but we can keep them for when we move things around, or if we need them for like a party or something, which we've done. And we do try to buy a fair amount of secondhand furniture, which is something that I love. And honestly, those pieces tend to be my favorite, but it's a lot less predictable. And sometimes you do need to find a very specific piece, which if you're buying higher quality is just going to be a lot more expensive upfront. And now we've talked about, like in this video, especially the value, like thinking of value in terms of cost per use, which I think is generally a better way to think about purchases. And if you're buying much, much higher quality furniture that you're planning to keep for decades potentially, and you're not going to just be tossing it when you're done, those probably will work out to a lot lower cost per use in the long term, but it does represent a lot more upfront cost. So that's been more. But less money has been spent on going out. I looked through my finances and my calendar over the past year since we've moved, and I go out less now than I did before. And yes, some of that is pandemic, but I'm even comparing that to 2021. But certainly in years like 2018 and 2019, like my default was much more to go out for socializing, where now I very frequently just prefer to have people over in different circumstances, whether it's just popping by for a movie night or to watch a show we like or to have a little dinner party or a bigger party, whatever it is. Like, because I've invested in this home, because I'm able to kind of make it my own, because I definitely want to get my money's worth on the home, I am just a lot more inclined to stay in and appreciate it, especially post renovation, which again, I dive into in full detail in our society bonus video this month. Click join to get that video. So in total, I actually have spent less money since buying this house on going out than I have prior, which is balanced out by other things, notably the renovations that we did this year for sure. But it's still something really cool to know going forward in life, and something that I kind of want to keep up as a trend, because entertaining in the home is fabulous. But as I'm pointing out there, more money on renovations. I won't divulge all the numbers here of our renovations because that is in that members only video where I go into full detail on it. But we did our first of a few planned renovations that we have for this apartment. And although it was less expensive than the national average for things like this, because we live in a much smaller space than the average American home, it was still very expensive. And it ended up being about 20% more than we had initially budgeted for through some of those unforeseen issues and repairs, like I had mentioned. And this is not to say that this is just a question of spending money. I do believe that intelligent renovations that are focused on things like maximizing space, improving living quality, replacing very old or outdated appliances or materials, and other things that greatly improve the value of the home, I do believe are investments, and they can be part of the strategy of exceeding that national average when it comes to how much a home appreciates. That's something that my mother is very, very good at and has done in all of her homes, and it has greatly increased the resale value of the homes that she's lived in through some of those really strategic renovations. But they are definitely an investment up front. And until you sell your home, essentially, you're not really going to be able to see the fruits of those investments. And obviously, outside of a few minor DIY things that you could kind of get away with in a rental, that just wasn't something that was part of my vocabulary before, because you can't be out here knocking down walls in a rental. So yeah, that is a definite more expense that I'm having this year. But on that note, less of an expense has been DIYing. Similarly to the sort of knockdown furniture stuff, although there are a few things that we will do ourselves, like mounting simple shelves, painting, applying, peel and stick wallpaper, things like that, mounting curtains, what have you. Like, for the most part, doing DIY projects that are, more sort of elaborate in nature in a home that you're planning to not only live in for years and years to come, but also hopefully one day planning to resell at a higher value, is not necessarily going to be the best either idea in terms of your skill level and aesthetic ability, but also use of your time when you can sort of compare it to someone who might be a skilled contractor or artisan in whatever it is that you're looking to do. Some people are really, really excellent at some of those more high-level DIY projects. It's just not really our wheelhouse, and not something I think, especially in a co-op where you're on the hook for, like, if you incur damage in the building, like, that's a problem for the whole co-op, like all of that kind of stuff. It's just really not something that, we want to be messing around with. So there's definitely less money being spent on DIY projects because there just isn't that like DIY energy of a rental of like, well, if this doesn't work out, who cares? I won't be living here a year from now and I just have to tear it down anyway when I leave. It's like, you gotta live here, girl, and potentially even sell this one day. So like, you don't need to be doing that crazy you see on Pinterest when you're trying to invest in something. Another thing I'm spending more on, and there's really nothing to say here except it's true, is homeowners insurance. The average is about $1,400 a year nationally. In New York City, it's more, but point being is that like homeowners insurance is just not even something you think of when you're renting, and then all of a sudden you live in a home, you have to pay homeowners insurance, like that comes out of nowhere. And then you have to pay it. So more money on that for sure. But again, on the flip side of spending less money, and this isn't necessarily spending less money on one specific thing or all up front, but it is a big change that comes along when you are owning a home, which is being less impacted by inflation. So aside from using really spurious excuses like inflation as a reason for radical rent increases in markets like New York City, when it's actually much more likely to be things like broker and landlord collusion to recoup post-pandemic losses, owning a home long-term does actually have benefits in terms of hedging against inflation. Home values in a strong economy typically increase 3 to 4% every year, but recently that has spiked even higher. Putting your money in a home can be better than putting it into many types of investment accounts, and it is way better than spending it on rent. It's ultimately all about the home price appreciation. You'll be able to ensure that your money holds value through the years as long as the economy and the housing market stays stable long term, and even short-term dips shouldn't trouble you unduly over a 30-year time span. As inflation continues to spiral, if you've locked in a mortgage that you can afford at a good rate in an area that is likely to appreciate at least at or above the average levels, you're making thoughtful improvements to the home, and you're planning to stay there at least long enough to escape any shorter-term market fluctuations / not have to pay things like flip taxes, you can feel pretty good about the decision to buy a home. Of course, also assuming you're not doing like some Americans do in buying, for example, way more house than you need. It's not a universally good decision, but it can have a lot of benefits. It's just important to remember, like all of these more and less spending categories, that it's a mixed bag financially, both in the short and long term. But like I said at the beginning, you gotta live somewhere, so it at least might as well be a place that you really like. As always, guys, thank you for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to come back every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday for new and awesome videos. Goodbye!